Most home gardens don't save money. They quietly drain it. Seeds, fertilizers, water, tools. And at the end of the season, the harvest doesn't even come close to what was spent. That's the mistake most gardeners don't see. They treat gardening like a hobby instead of a system, and that's why the numbers never add up. Here's what's really happening. When your soil isn't efficient, you compensate with inputs. More fertilizer, more water, more replacements when plants fail. That's where the cost builds up. Weak soil creates weak plants, and weak plants are expensive to maintain. And this is exactly where a small shift makes a big difference. Instead of constantly buying inputs, you start producing your own. One thing that changed how I manage this is using a small 4-liter electric composter in the kitchen. It turns everyday food waste into usable material quickly, so I'm not waiting months for compost, while my garden keeps pulling nutrients out of the soil. That gap is where most people lose money. I'll leave the exact one I use in the description if you want to check it out. It's not about convenience, it's about closing the nutrient loop so you stop spending unnecessarily. Now let's get into how to actually build a garden that pays you back instead of costing you more every season. The first shift is understanding that not all crops are worth growing if your goal is saving money. A lot of gardeners plant things that are cheap to buy but expensive to grow. For example, onions and potatoes can be productive, but they take space, time, and inputs. If your goal is efficiency, you need to prioritize high-value, high-yield crops. Leafy greens are one of the best examples. In a small raised bed, you can grow continuous harvests of lettuce, spinach, or kale using cut-and-come-again methods. Instead of harvesting once, you harvest multiple times from the same plant. I've run beds where a single planting produced for 4 to 5 weeks straight. That kind of output is what actually saves money. And here's where most people get it wrong. They harvest everything at once. That stops production. If you take only the outer leaves and leave the center intact, the plant keeps growing. It's a simple adjustment, but it multiplies your yield without increasing cost. Now here's something that directly impacts your water bill, and most gardeners overlook it. Soil structure determines how much water you use. If your soil is compacted or low in organic matter, water runs off or evaporates quickly. That means you water more often, which costs more over time. I've tested this in raised beds with and without organic matter. Beds with consistent compost and mulch held moisture significantly longer. In practical terms, that meant watering every 3 to 4 days instead of daily. That's not just convenience, that's reduced cost and better plant health. And this connects to something we'll build on later. Mulch is not optional if you want to save money. It's one of the simplest ways to reduce water loss and improve soil efficiency. Now let's talk about something that separates average gardens from efficient ones: plant spacing. Most advice tells you to follow seed packet spacing exactly. That's not always the most efficient approach. In real gardens, spacing should be adjusted based on your goal. If you're growing for maximum yield per square meter, slightly denser planting can increase output, especially for leafy crops. But here's the key: you can't just crowd plants randomly. You need to maintain airflow and ensure nutrients are available. I've used tighter spacing with greens and herbs combined with regular compost feeding, and the result is higher yield without increasing input costs. But if you try this without feeding your soil, you'll get smaller plants instead of more production. Now here's where most people lose money without realizing it: timing. Planting everything at once seems efficient, but it creates gaps where nothing is being harvested. During those gaps, your garden isn't producing value. What works better is staggered planting. Instead of planting a full bed of lettuce at once, plant smaller sections every week. That way, you're harvesting continuously. This keeps your kitchen supplied and reduces the need to buy from outside. I've used this approach in both soil beds and hydroponic systems, and the difference is obvious. Instead of one large harvest followed by nothing, you get consistent output. And here's something most people don't think about. Consistency is what saves money, not occasional abundance. Now let's move into something that directly affects your input costs: fertility management. Most gardeners rely heavily on store-bought fertilizers. That adds up quickly. But the bigger issue is inconsistency. Over-fertilizing can damage plants, while under-fertilizing reduces yield. What actually works is building a system where your soil feeds your plants. Compost plays a central role here, but it's not just about adding it once, it's about maintaining a steady supply. In my beds, I apply a thin layer of compost every couple of weeks during active growth. This keeps nutrients available without overwhelming the plants. It also supports microbial life, which improves nutrient cycling naturally. And this is where having quick access to compost becomes valuable. When you're running a productive garden, waiting months for compost isn't practical. You need a steady flow to keep everything balanced. Now here's something that can quietly increase your costs if you're not careful: crop failure. Every time a plant fails, you're losing time, space, and resources. Most failures come down to poor plant selection or mismatched conditions. If you're growing in hot conditions, choose heat-tolerant crops. If your space is limited, choose compact varieties. This sounds obvious, but a lot of gardeners ignore it and end up replacing plants mid-season. I've learned this the hard way. Growing the right plant for the right condition reduces failure rates significantly, and fewer failures mean fewer replacements and lower costs. Now let's talk about one of the most underrated ways to save money: propagation. Instead of buying new plants every season, you can regrow many crops from cuttings or scraps. Green onions, herbs, even some leafy greens can be propagated easily. In hydroponic setups, this becomes even more efficient. You can maintain continuous growth cycles without constantly buying new seeds or seedlings. Over time, this reduces your input costs significantly. And here's where things start to come together. When you combine propagation, composting, and efficient planting, your garden starts to become self-sustaining. Now here's something that most people won't say directly. Convenience often costs more in gardening. Pre-mixed soils, constant fertilizer use, replacing plants instead of fixing problems, these all add up. Efficiency, on the other hand, requires a bit more understanding up front, but saves money long term. Once your system is set up correctly, maintenance becomes easier and cheaper. If you've made it this far, you're already thinking differently from most gardeners. And if you want more strategies like this, practical, tested, and focused on real results, subscribe to the channel, because this is about building systems that actually work. Now here's the bigger picture. A garden that saves money isn't about cutting corners. It's about reducing waste. Every drop of water, every bit of nutrient, every square meter of space should be working efficiently. When your soil holds moisture, you water less. When your plants are healthy, you replace them less. When your system is consistent, you buy less from outside. At the end of the day, saving money in the garden comes down to understanding how everything connects. Soil, plants, water, and timing all work together. Once you align those, your garden stops being an expense and starts becoming a resource, and that's the difference most people never reach. If this helped you rethink how you're running your garden, share it with someone who's spending more than they should. And if you're serious about growing smarter, subscribe and stay tuned.